to a much faster extent or at a faster rate than otherwise would be the case. What do you think of that?
Well, the problem is that in order to operate so-called mining or hashing rigs, in order to operate a bunch of hashing rigs, effectively, you have to run them 24/7, which means you need base load. You can do that with solar and wind plus battery, but if you only did it based on solar or wind overage, your hashing rig utilization would be much less. So you'd be at a disadvantage.
Sure,
hydro or geothermal are great as renewable means. I'm also pro nuclear. I think modern nuclear power plants are safe, contrary to what people may think. I really think it's possible to make very, very extremely safe nuclear. I'm talking about fission. You don't need fusion. And then, of course, fusion. You just got that big fusion reactor in the sky called the sun. It comes up every day. But I think a combination of solar and wind plus stationary storage will get you that base load, so you can run hashing 24/7.
Jack, I'm curious. You've stated that Bitcoin incentivizes renewable energy. That's what we're talking about now. Do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, everything that Elon said and Kathy mentioned, but it's also incentivizing a lot of innovation in just energy space, and just like looking at unused energy. There's a company called Great American Mining that caps the methane flares on oil fields to power their rigs. And you just imagine, and you mentioned nuclear, Elon, as well, and just imagine all the unused energy that is just being wasted every single day. And being able to get that energy and converting it into a secure, sound money system for the planet feels like a worthy trade-off. And that's the sort of incentive that I think is most powerful, is like, how do we reuse what is being currently just dumped on the ground and wasted and not considered, and how do we do that at scale? And I think that's a bigger conversation that I think is missing. But I agree with everything that Elon has said, and also the paper we put forth.
I'm curious if any of you have thoughts on how what the industry can do to accelerate the transition to renewable energy. And like Elon specifically, could Tesla Energy or Starlink play a role?
Well, I think Tesla can play a role. Tesla's literal reason for existence. The reason I've put so much of my life energy into Tesla, which is a lot. In fact, I would say that I've had some pretty tough life experiences, and Tesla is responsible for probably 2/3 of all personal and professional pain combined. Just to give you a sense of perspective there. So this is a hella hard situation. But we do solar, commercial solar, solar retrofit, as well as the solar roof, and we make consumer battery packs called Powerwall for houses and small businesses, and then the utility scale, which are gigantic. We've done now a number of gigawatt-hour installations. That's a lot. That's a lot. And a lot of them actually have been for load leveling the grid. Mostly they are, and combined with the first really big one we did, which is 100 megawatt installation in Australia. That's actually helped stabilize a huge portion of the South Australian grid, because it's able to react so fast. In fact, at first, because they've got a billing system in Australia that I think works at the sort of millisecond level, and we were operating at the microsecond level. So the system was operating so fast that the measuring system couldn't see it. But so Tesla's certainly doing a lot to enable renewables, especially wind and solar. And in fact, the limiting factor for us right now is cell production. So we need to both internally get the Tesla internal battery cells produced, as well as increase supply from suppliers. I mean, generally, when I talk to our suppliers and they say, how many cells would you like us? So how many cells can you make? Because sometimes they're like concerned, like, well, is Tesla going to compete with them on cells? I'm like, no. If you want to make the cells, be our guest. It's just that we need a crazy number of batteries, and they need to be done. It also needs to be mined and produced and manufactured in an ethical and environmentally sound way. So, Tesla, we really do aspire to be the good guys, like, to be a company that people can believe in. That doesn't mean we don't make mistakes, but that's what we try. So, but I think generally hydro, especially existing hydro, is good for mining. Geothermal, there's lots of places in the world that have geothermal energy. Like I said, nuclear is also good. I think just I'm like as I said earlier, the expectation is not like that the energy production must be pure as the driven snow, but it must it can't be using it also cannot be using the world's dirtiest coal, which it was for a moment there. That's just difficult for Tesla to support in that situation. So I think, but I do think long-term renewable energy will actually be the cheapest form of energy. It just doesn't happen overnight. But as long as there is a conscious and determined and real effort by the mining community to move towards renewables, then obviously Tesla can support that.
That's great. Kathy, we've been talking a lot about energy, but many institutions are facing questions around Bitcoin's relationship with ESG. Can you maybe speak a little bit more to what is S and G in ESG and how Bitcoin might support those?
Sure. So E, of course, is environmental, S is social, and G is governance. And there is a massive movement afoot in the institutional world, especially, to embrace ESG and make sure that their asset managers are doing the same. So if we've just talked about environmental, and I really do believe that Bitcoin will be much more environmentally friendly, certainly than traditional gold mining or the traditional financial services sector. In many ways, it already is, and it's just going to get better that way. In terms of social, I know that many institutions, when they are thinking of social, they think of diversity and equity, pay equity, and all of that. But from our point of view, the disruptive innovation point of view, social is much more than that. It is saving lives, of course, autonomous technology, that would be another topic for Elon. But in this case, allowing access to payment technology, as Jack is saying, everywhere around the world without friction. And just back to the remittance example, I think if I've got these stats correctly, there are certain countries in the world that are incredibly dependent on remittances for GDP. To Tonga, 37%, El Salvador, which just deemed Bitcoin legal currencies, 24%, Nepal, 24%. And I think the remittance industry globally, roughly 700 billion. So saving people these egregious fees, think about it, you're paying anywhere from 8% to, as Jack said, 30% of your $100 that you're sending back to your family. That is a social responsibility, I would submit, as is just the economic empowerment that Bitcoin will enable. We've talked about that already. And I know that Alex Gladstein is going to be talking later about, the 4.3 billion people in the world who are hostage to authoritarian regimes, or the 1.3 billion who are living in double-digit and triple-digit inflation, if not more. Saving them from the destruction of their purchasing power certainly is a noble social goal. So we expand social to be much more than the traditional ESG community. And then on governance, you've got the transparency of the ecosystem. It's completely transparent, unlike the opaqueness of financial systems and the toll takers in the traditional financial world. And I think a huge part of governance in the Bitcoin ecosystem are the Bitcoin core developers. Now, before I met them, and I've had the pleasure and the honor of meeting many of them, that was a part of this ecosystem I didn't understand. But actually getting to sit down and talk to them, if I have a learning curve need, it certainly is on the technology side. But in terms of talking to them about economics, economic theory, failed monetary regimes historically, they know economic history, many of them, better than anyone I've ever met. So that gives me a great degree of confidence that they do believe they are on a noble mission. They could be paid a lot more than they're being paid right now if they worked at Google or Facebook or some of these other areas. But they've chosen, this sense of purpose for a noble goal, and they have incredibly strong technology backgrounds. As well as a good understanding of economic history, especially monetary history. And it gives me a great deal of comfort as I think about the governance of the ecosystem, much more so than I think we would find in other financial ecosystems. And just to give you an example of that, I think 2 years, we were talking about, there's a big debate about reorganizations, I know, in the Ethereum network right now. Well, we saw the core Bitcoin developers and others at work back in 2019 when Binance tried to reorganize in order to reclaim 7,000 Bitcoin that were hacked. And they just wouldn't allow it. So we've already had some very good tests of the Bitcoin ecosystem, including developers. So that would be my answer.
Thank you. And it's a great transition to the next topic area, which is Bitcoin ethos. And what is Bitcoin ethos? I mean, Bitcoin was born as open source and it's very transparent. There's also a staunch defense from the community around decentralization and a lot of the core principles of Bitcoin. So let's talk a little bit about that and what makes it special. Jack, Square has done a lot to support open source Bitcoin. Can you tell us a little bit about what Square has done and what advice you'd have for other institutions looking to follow in its footsteps?
Yeah, I mean, I was very skeptical of corporations when I was a kid, and I'm still skeptical of corporations today. And as we've used corporations to be, they've been great vessels for what we need to do and the ideas that we need to bring to the world. But, Bitcoin is not that. And when we were considering Bitcoin and how Square intersected, I was really concerned with how we don't disrupt the community in a negative way, how we promote what is amazing about it, and how we help it grow in that way, in the way that it wants to. So we created your team, Steve, which is Square Crypto, which is hiring open source developers to work on whatever they want and whatever they think is most important to help Bitcoin. We created an organization called Copo, which we gave up all of our crypto patents so that the community can use them in defense against trolls and some crazy characters we won't name. And we continue to find ways that, following that Bitcoin path, we're going to create a hardware wallet. We're probably going to do a lot more in hardware. Everything that we do in the space is going to be completely open source, from the hardware design to the software, taking in the community's push. And we're building a developer platform as well, in the same open development, open source, and completely transparent. So I think as institutions or companies like ours consider getting in the space, I think contribution back to the community is important. Tesla did this with accepting payments for Tesla and finding security holes and improving the stack. And as I said before, we can't just see this as an asset that we own and an investment vehicle. This is something that has the potential to change everything and make the lives of everyone on this planet better in some small, maybe marginal way, but those margins will be meaningful as they compound over time.
Great. Elon, you've tweeted before that any wallet that doesn't give the user their private key should be avoided at all costs. Can you tell us more about why is that important, and how does what's its relationship with decentralization?
Well, it's difficult to say that if you own crypto in an exchange and the exchange does not give you your private keys, it's not clear that you own anything. I mean, if there's something that if that exchange breaks or is hacked or or is subject to seizure by the government or something like that, your crypto is gone. So in order to actually have a properly decentralized finance, which I'm a fan of, I think it makes sense. Then you have to own your private keys, and you should be the only one who has your private keys. So if you're the only one who has the private keys, then you own it. If someone else has your private keys, effectively they own it too, and the security of your crypto is then dependent upon them or any entity that can affect them. So I think what Jack's doing sounds like a good idea to have a hardware wallet that's the only thing that contains your private keys. I think that's like in terms of sort of empowering the people, which I very much believe in. Then I think you want to have people have their own wallets and be the only ones that have the private keys to that wallet. So-called wallet, the other side of the of the crypto.
Right. I agree, and I think we'll see an emergence too of new solutions that use multi-sig, like with a 2 of 3 keys, where the user has 2 keys and then you get assisted custody by having an institution hold a 3rd key. Can be a good solution as well. Yeah.
Well, you can just put your private key in something that has dual access or voting access as an application on an existing network.
Right. So the Bitcoin community is known for staunchly defending Bitcoin's principles. Sometimes it can be rude and aggressive, but I think what it stems from is just a desire to not have wealthy or powerful people or institutions negatively impacting Bitcoin or sort of changing the rules in favor of them. I'm curious to hear from each of you what role you feel like you and your own institutions, your own companies, what role can you play in Bitcoin, and how do you positively impact it without having these negative drawbacks? Kathy, maybe start with you.
Sure. Yes. Well, ARC has stood for 2 things: democratization and transparency. Democratize it. We're the closest you'll find to a venture capital fund in the public equity markets, and I kind of feel that Bitcoin, or we have Bitcoin's DNA from that point of view. One of the things in terms of democratization is education. We have one of our missions, values, is to educate, and I do believe that that some of Yacine El-Mandra's white papers. Yacine's our lead crypto analyst, who's worked very closely with you, Steve, on this conference, are helping the cause. We've done, and not only for retail investors, we found that we had to do a bit more when it came to institutional investors, just because of the way that they invest and the way they like to receive information. So just like in our investments, we've been, the retail community has been more attracted to us first, and now the institutional community is coming along. So I do think our transparency of research, especially in the social world, social media, pushing our research out for free to anyone, is part of our way of helping the community. And I do think encouraging, and this is something that Jack just said, I would encourage the support of the Bitcoin core developer community. As I said before, it's amazing to me, having gotten to know some of them, how strong their sense of purpose is here. And so we'd like to be helpful in making that happen as well.
That's great. Jack, how about you? How do you view your own personal role and the companies you run?
I think my own personal role through the companies I run is to really push for more decentralization, like at everything that we intend to do with the wallet, being non-custodial, building a developer platform, focusing on non-custodial solutions. On the Square side is important, being completely open development and open source. But I also think it's important on the Twitter side as well. My biggest focus right now is on a decentralized social media protocol. We're calling it Blue Sky. It's super, super early, but we've learned a lot from what makes Bitcoin Bitcoin and why that's important. I've learned a lot in that sense as well. And I think, just continuing to push on that thread and show it with our actions every single day in support of this community that's taught me so much, and I think will benefit